name is Michelle Green. I'll be presenting on Asperger's syndrome. Okay, so first of all, thank you to everyone who managed to come to my seminar today. The more we know about our students with Asperger's syndrome, the better the education we can provide to them. Alright, so first of all, some information on the condition. Alright, Asperger's syndrome. To diagnose someone with Asperger's syndrome, they need to present with communicative, social and functioning impairments. A student with Asperger's syndrome may present with many or a few of these characteristics: impairment in social interaction and communication, specific ranges of interest, an extreme obsession with a particular pursuit or topic, repetitive behaviours and rituals, above or average intelligence, and extreme intelligence in some areas, extreme sensory sensitivity, difficulty with any and all social and emotional interactions. They do want social relationships, but they don't know how to conduct them. There's difficulty handling change of any kind, including small or large changes. They can have explosive meltdowns as a result of a build-up of anxiety, and connected to that there is a strong propensity for anxiety and in some cases depression. There can also be a lack of fine and gross motor skills and a difficulty in carrying on conversation. They don't sometimes know if they're in someone's personal space, or if they're talking too loudly or too long about something that they can't tell the other person is not interested in. Okay, now although Asperger's is on the autism spectrum, it does present with very different learning and behaviour profiles to autism and has been described as high-functioning autism. Alright. Now some history of Asperger's syndrome so we can kind of have a fuller understanding. It was discovered by a physician named Hans Asperger, who was the first to realise that there were a specific collection of children and adults exhibiting the same behaviours. He conducted studies and made extensive notes, but he was a German physician writing right at the end of the Second World War, so there's no surprise that the English-speaking world didn't take too much notice of his research until about 1981, when it was translated and included in a paper by a British psychiatrist, Lorna Wing. Even after Lorna Wing publicised her findings and made Asperger's syndrome more known, it still wasn't accepted or differentiated from autism until 1993, when it was given its own entry in the World Health Organization's International Classification of Diseases. In this way, it's still a new disorder to some extent, and there's a lot of research that's still being conducted. Recent changes that are important for those thinking about how to assist and diagnose those with Asperger's have occurred. It is now classified by the American Psychiatric Association under the autism spectrum, although there is some debate as to the legitimacy of this approach because it does present so differently than autism. Okay, so causes of Asperger's. It's a complicated thing to talk about the cause of Asperger's because there's no single cause. There are environmental, metabolic, immunological factors, but it's shown that it can develop from abnormalities in brain function and structure, with usually nothing to do with the parenting of the child. It's a complex and lifelong disorder. There is a lot of research being done, but there doesn't seem to be a clear indication of exactly what causes Asperger's syndrome to develop. The behaviours that people with Asperger's exhibit are usually a reaction to what's going on in their brain or what's going on for them physiologically. So what has been done? Improvements in the treatment of Asperger's. Um, I would say that treatment options have only started to be developed kind of in the last about decade as Asperger's has become more familiar in the medical world. Some causes can be prevented. So some, like for example, the mother contracting rubella can cause Asperger's, but that can now be immunized against. So while there are some obvious ways to have preventative measures, there aren't really any quote-unquote cures for Asperger's, and I'm sure I would argue that many people with Asperger's wouldn't necessarily want a cure. There are some ways to combat the more difficult parts, the more difficult symptoms of Asperger's. Intensive long-term therapy from a young age can help a lot with developing a child away from the more damaging and extreme parts of Asperger's. Other treatment options available include medical and educational and dietary options. But there's no single treatment to combat the negative aspects of Asperger's syndrome because it is a multi-causal syndrome. Okay. Now, the educational needs of someone with Asperger's syndrome, you need to consider these implications first. So they will have average to above average intelligence. In class, they'll tend to be hyperverbal, so they won't realise they're talking too loud, too long, or at the wrong time. They may be very interested in their special interest and want to talk about that to the exclusion of everything else in the class, and they won't be aware of what anyone else is feeling on that. They might not be interested in certain subjects or parts of subjects because it doesn't line up with their interests, and they may refuse to do work on that particular subject. They do have a pedantic speaking style. It may seem like they're not taking anything in when they really are, but what they're putting out is they're only really interested in talking about what they're interested in, but they may be taking in more than you think. Exam environments are a problem for people with Asperger's syndrome because they do kind of inherently contain a lot of change. So there's a change in the daily structure, there's a different room, could be a different venue. The people, teachers and supervisors who they know well are now acting coldly towards them because, you know, they're supervising exams. So all of these things can make someone with Asperger's really, really distressed. What else? They don't take change very well. So something like a substitute teacher or an excursion or a schedule or new desk locations can kind of be like a world-ending issue for someone with Asperger's and can really cause them a lot of distress. So strategies to help with these educational implications include allowing people with Asperger's to take comforting props into their exams, so a certain pencil case, a certain pencil that will just be something familiar to help them calm down. You can talk to parents about this and find out what will help them to be calm. They should have a separate exam location away from other students, and they should be allowed time to have rest breaks, and those rest breaks should not be factored into their exam time. They should be counted separately so that the students have adequate time and adequate rest breaks to actually complete their exam. Just because they have anxieties and symptoms that will stop them from performing doesn't mean that we should just let that happen. We should allow for that. And there should also be signals given, signals that are able to be given by the students to their supervisors so that they can make it really clear, I'm really, really distressed, because they may be so distressed they don't want to kind of talk about it. So just a simple signal should be installed for the exam environment. Also, oral exams and computer-based exams can be really, really helpful. The key is to focus on the students' strengths in exams and in their education, not their weaknesses. Other things, just general educational strategies to help your student with Asperger's syndrome. You should prepare the students and the parents for any changes in teaching, location, scheduling as much as you can in advance. Make sure you have a private, quiet area for students to take time out for themselves. And all the staff, you all need to know their signal. We'll have to put one together for when I need to go out, and you need to let them leave immediately, and there's an agreement that they will come back in when they're ready. You need to use visual reminders and outlines to help with due dates and understanding work. If it's relevant, you can try and work in their special interest into your instruction. Make sure that you let your students know, the rest of the students know, that someone with Asperger's will be in their class, because the more that they understand how someone with Asperger's functions, and the more they understand the way that certain things will affect someone with Asperger's, the better they will be able to help your student, and it's much more likely they'll make friends. It's much more likely that bullying will be minimized because once you know someone and you get to know someone, you can't stand to see them treated badly. Also, peer educators and buddies, the same year or different, can be used to take them around to classes, answer social academic questions, kind of translate school for them, especially when you're not there. They will need someone. Also just logic, kind of in class, you need to place them next to students that are compassionate. And when you're giving instructions, you need to make sure they really understood what you said, give them time to take it in. And if there's people with fine motor problems, they should be able to use scribes or voice recognition to help them get their information down. And again, you want to present your information as visually as possible, using charts and mind maps, and if necessary, you can allow your student with Asperger's to use earplugs when they're doing quiet work. All right, now physical concerns. Now, I think the way we need to think about it, providing for a student's physical needs, it's not just physiological. Their physical state is affected by their physical space. So the way that the classroom works will affect them. So implications you need to consider for students with Asperger's syndrome. They will have problems with fine and gross motor skills. They won't want to do physical activities in class. They'll prefer to print or use a computer instead of handwriting their assignments. They'll have really extreme reactions to sensory stimulation, like touch, taste, smell, sound, light and textures, and changes in those things in class. So strategies to address those concerns. You want to try and inform the student and their parents of any unusual events relevant to sensory stimulation that are going to occur in a class. Noisy events, food being brought into class, really anything that's going to stimulate their senses in a way that will maybe overload them. Counsellors can help you with desk location and arrangement. For example, students with Asperger's are best at the front of the class because this will minimise distraction from other students, and it will probably help them to receive your signals and signal you if they need to. Okay, counselling professionals, you can also make use of the counselling professionals in the school, talk to the parents and the student about how to deal with anxiety in the classroom, how to calm themselves, how to breathe. You've got to make sure your classroom is organised and uncluttered. Allow your student to use a small laptop if they like to take notes and do schoolwork, especially if they have motor skills problems. If you do need to know as much as possible about the best physical environment, I would suggest probably really sitting down with not only your IEP team, but the kids' parents, because they can tell you what the best, sorry, I just got to calm down. They can tell you what the kids' environment is like at home and how that's set up. All right, now the next slide. All right, so social implications. This is probably the biggest nightmare for someone with Asperger's. Equipping them with social skills is one of the most important things because they don't really have any and they really need them. So teachers, you know, we all need to know that social competence is going to predict how competent they will be in the classroom academically. You know, so social concerns, you're going to see a lot of removed and untalkative Asperger's students. They can be active, they might want to control the way the classroom is working, they can talk at people rather than talking with them. They have trouble with two-sided conversations. They'll have problems with jokes and colloquial language, and you know, they won't really understand if someone goes, "Oh, I'd die for a sausage roll." Like, that will just really distress them. They will take that completely literally. So kind of just everyday conversations within the class will be difficult for them. There's difficulty just generally kind of looking someone in the eye and engaging them. They won't understand kind of non-verbal communication, and they won't really know if they're in another student's personal space. They lack empathy, but this is really just a lack of observation and understanding, not a bad nature. And this will make it harder for them to make and maintain friendships. And I would say that making friendships is probably one of the most important things to help your student with Asperger's to do, because that is going to carry them, help to carry them throughout their schooling. So strategies to help socially include you know, observing your student during recess and lunch, and during activities in class, how they're interacting with people, who is really nice to them, who gets them, who do they get along with. You know, make these observations so that you can then pass them on when you have meetings with the parents and the rest of your IEP team. You need to make sure that you're meeting with the members of your IEP team constantly to help the child with developing social skills prior to the beginning of the school year. So you need to keep communicating with your team about their social progress once the school year starts, and you know, you can help them to engage with social skills by I think it's social stories, which kind of have which illustrate ways that people have social exchanges with each other. And you can also do role playing, where you can sit with the student and almost go through a kind of script to help them understand how social exchanges work in person. And again, a peer buddy will really help socially. So their friend, whomever you assign to them, can introduce them to new people, explain them and their behaviours to other students, and can just generally help them understand what's going on when you're not there. Okay, emotional and mental concerns. All right, self-esteem is often low. You need to praise their work and their intellect specifically. So not just, "Oh, you did a good job." You should say, "Oh, you know so much about trains," you know, so that they feel smart. You know, someone who has Asperger's will have extreme reactions and anxiety, and if it's not addressed, can become quite aggressive with others and violent towards themselves. It can be just a really distressing situation for everyone involved, including the person with Asperger's. If they have meltdowns, this is usually related to an incident or a concern or something unresolved. So until you actually figure out what that is, you're not going to get anywhere. So, and you can't argue with someone with Asperger's. They will, you're not going to progress the situation at all. It will just cause further problems. And if emotional issues are not resolved, students can feel very lonely and prone to depression, especially in high school due to isolation. Okay, strategies to address emotional and mental considerations. So it's not a failure to bring in members of your IEP team who might be present in school to help you if they are having an emotional meltdown. These people can just help you work through the issue and later discuss it in an IEP meeting and figure out, especially talking to the parents, what it is that set off their child and how you can avoid similar meltdowns in the future. You need to give them space when they're emotionally overwhelmed, and wait until they're a bit more calm to offer assistance. You need to give them adequate space to calm down. Sometimes they will struggle to express themselves in language if they're really distressed, so you need to give them signals so that they can signal to you when they are upset. And make sure all of their teachers, so you all need to know what those signals will be, and you need to be looking out for them, because it will be important to avoid kind of the situation worsening. Okay, you really need to make sure that there are regular appointments being made with a school counsellor, because people with Asperger's can function very awkwardly in social situations, and if that continues it can get really, really bad and they can get totally withdrawn, and they will go back into themselves where they're safe, and they don't have to kind of figure everyone out, and that's really what you want to avoid. You want to foster good relationships, you want to foster friendships, and you want to eventually get them to a place where they can handle things that would have caused them anxiety before. You need to be having regular meetings with your IEP team to discuss the student's emotional well-being with parents and with the rest of the team, because it's really a group situation when it comes to addressing emotional needs, because they can be very complex and you need a lot of input. And I'd probably say the last thing is just do your best as a teacher to help them make friends. So, people with Asperger's really, they may seem removed, but they definitely desperately want to have friends and live a normal life, especially teenagers, but they are ill-equipped to do this. You need to help them understand what both sides of a friendship look like, what they should expect from a friend, and what they need to do to be one. Alright, so the next thing, I do have a specialty. I will be doing, I'm hoping to be an English teacher in secondary school, so I'm now just going to do a couple of slides in relation to that. Okay, so in terms of teaching English to people with Asperger's, it's really important that they master English, because it's going to affect their future job prospects and possibly affect whether they can get into certain university courses that they want. The implications we need to consider for students with Asperger's when we're teaching them English is they want certainty in the content that they're engaging with, whereas English won't necessarily offer that. It's often interpretive, and there's a lot of inferring that goes on and a lot of emotional intelligence that's required. So it's a bit of a minefield for students with Asperger's. They are visual learners. They're not great with the auditory. So you need to make sure that there's not a lot of talking at them. Use as many visual aids as you can. They'll struggle with comprehension and answering questions that require them to infer about people's emotions or intentions, or they'll struggle with fiction generally, and they will have problems when it comes to engaging with texts like that, whereas they might find it easier to engage with non-fiction texts. They'll struggle to understand emotion in characters and express emotion in their own work. And they will struggle with literal interpretations of figurative language. As we said before, I die for a sausage roll. They won't necessarily be able to deliver what certain creative tasks require. They'll struggle taking feedback on their work sometimes and won't want to edit it once it's finished. They will also possibly struggle to summarize a text and point out the main concepts without kind of going into too much detail or focusing on an errant piece of the text that they want to focus on that doesn't matter as much. They also may have poor time management skills, again, because they'll probably focus on something that doesn't matter as much as the task as a whole. And they will possibly have trouble staying focused and comprehending the more lengthy, complicated English assignments that you get in high school compared to the ones in primary school that would have been much more simplistic. So to help combat those problems, one moment. So again, we need to make sure we're using visual aids. There needs to be you need to limit the amount of talk, so you have to make sure that you're aware of how they're feeling. They don't function well with 1,000 different kind of examples. They just want clear notes. They want a summary of your lesson after you've finished, and clear, simple language when you're talking to them just privately. And you need to help them to kind of use scaffolding models to get their ideas down, for example, in essays or creative works, because they will struggle, with how that is meant to work. Also, you can get them to prepare their own representation of texts, of the characters and the emotions and the events, so that they can not only get a fuller understanding of the text, but they can also they can engage more with, for example, the parts that they wouldn't normally be interested in, so the emotional motivations of the characters. As long as they can visually represent it, that's what you want with your people with students with Asperger's engaging with your texts. Okay, and if they need time to talk about the texts more, it's a really good idea, just because the more time that you can spend with them discussing the text's main ideas, character perspectives, even role-playing the characters, will just give them a better understanding. Okay, so secondary school concerns, that is something that I think is really important to address. There are some changes, and because I want to be a secondary teacher, I'll be talking about this. There are some implications we need to think of. There is no longer in high school one teacher that is dedicated to taking care of them. They've got lots of teachers now. They've got head teachers and principals, just an overwhelming amount of people who they have to get to know, who they have to understand, and there isn't someone who can just focus on them. They have to move rooms every hour, often through many, many more people than they would encounter in the corridors of their primary school. There's a lot more group work, and the relationships with fellow students can become much more complex and confusing. So strategies to address those things. Overall, the level of support must increase from elementary to middle school to prevent regression emotionally. So the parents and professionals in your IEP team really need to start putting extra effort in when it comes into high school, because they are really going to need it, as opposed to normal, instead of normally functioning students who will probably want less help. So as teachers, we all need to be informed about what's going to cause them anxiety across the board. We need to be aware of all these things in secondary school that are going to set them off and know how to help them. We need to put in that extra effort, and throughout the semester, especially coming into heavy exam and assessment times, we need to make sure that we're talking to our students and finding out how they are. We need to be having meetings with our IEP team and talking about their progression. We may not be able to give them the attention they received in primary school, but we can certainly do our best to accommodate their efforts and help them in secondary school. All right, so in conclusion, it's really important. Students with Asperger's can achieve great things and lead really happy, satisfied lives. Lives to the fullest, as Jesus would say. Teachers just need to do their part. We all need to do our part by altering our practice to produce more inclusive classrooms. After all, people with Asperger's syndrome have the potential to contribute great things to society. There's no doubt about that. In fact, I'd like to leave you with what is probably my favourite quote about people with Asperger's syndrome by author Temple Grandin, who actually is a person who has Asperger's herself. After all, the really social people did not invent the first stone spear. It was probably invented by an Aspie who chipped away at rocks while the other people socialised around a campfire. Without autism traits, we might still be living in caves.